So there are a lot of discouraging things on the news right now, but one thing that stood out to me for a while is the continual rise in anti-Semitism. Now, if you're a Jew, you are painfully aware of this. But if you're not a Jew, even if you're not religious, if you're just an American, this should bother you, and it should concern you. Because as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So what can we do about it? Well, today I'm going to meet with my friend Rabbi Slomovitz to get his perspective on what's happening right now and how we can help support our Jewish friends. We're going to go eat lunch together at one of his favorite restaurants and then meet back in the studio for what I think will be a great conversation. So come along with me.
Meet me down by the water. Escape the crowd so we can be alone. 'Cause lately days are feeling shorter. Before we know it, the summer will have gone. But I know somewhere we can go.
This is, I don't know how long this has been here, but it was here when we arrived, so at least 25 years. Wow. And this is a small store, but it just generates a lot of business. And whenever there's a Jewish holiday, they go for that holiday. Sometimes when somebody with a big bag goes and just the order.
Hey, how are you?
I know somewhere we can go.
The reason for this is a podcast.
There's 7 panels. It sounds like there's 8 panels.
I think I said that you look
Yeah, I did read through it initially. Okay. Well, Rabbi, thank you so much for agreeing to do lunch together and to have this conversation. I really enjoyed lunch, by the way. So for anyone who's watching, if you're ever in East Cobb, Georgia, you got to stop by Bagelicious. It was quite delicious. But I thank you for your kindness, because we've been friends for a few years now and have had several conversations about many things. And I just appreciate your kindness to me and your interest in me, and just pray that our friendship will continue to grow for many years to come.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, well, thank you. So in talking about anti-Semitism, it's something that's been on my heart for a while, and I know that it bothers many people who are watching right now. They want to know what to do, and quite honestly, sometimes I don't know what to do.
Right.
But I thought maybe the first question to really ask is there truly a rise in anti-Semitism, or is it a growing awareness of anti-Semitism? Is this something that you experienced all the time? And does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And thank you for inviting me. And I love the opportunity to converse with people, because that's how we really learn. We get to understand people at a deeper level. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism has been with us for the last 2,000 years. And if somebody studies history, you can actually see it over time. So I think in many ways, the issue has always been here. I felt for a while that it was really becoming less of an issue. And unfortunately, with the situation in Israel and Gaza, it's risen again. And that's very much disappointing. It's one thing if somebody disagrees with the policy of a government to say that, and we can all do that. That's our freedom to do so. But what some people are doing is using that opening, if you will, to protest, and then merging it with anti-Jewish sentiment. And by the way, anti-Semitism is simply that people are disrespectful of Jewish people, Jewish institutions, Jewish countries. And it's getting pretty bad now. There are some soccer teams in Europe. I read recently about some Dutch soccer teams that the crowds are chanting, how many people are we going to gas today? Things like that,
my.
referring back to the Holocaust. So it's not just an intellectual conversation, it's a very real conversation. So it's unfortunately been with us, and that is something we should talk about. How did it come about? And I think in many ways, the anti-Semitism comes from a misunderstanding of the Christian scriptures and the interpretation of those scriptures. I've written a commentary to the book of Matthew, and there's stories about Judas, there's stories, Pontius Pilate in the crowd said, his blood be upon us and upon our children, or the well-known John 3:16, that verse. And then I always urge people to read 17, 18, 19, 20, the rest of the verses. But whatever it is, even the fact that we're talking about is a good thing, because I think we need to roll back. It's not just about modern day Israel. And hopefully, I think all our hopes and prayers is that conflict ends.
Yes.
And the hostages are released, and they make some sort of peace deal over there. But anti-Semitism existed, and now that we have a difficult time, it's risen up again. And so maybe when that situation is solved, it'll lessen. But unfortunately, we're not at this stage, which we should be, after 2,000 years, where it shouldn't exist. It should simply not exist, but it does. So we're facing a pretty serious issue right now.
So it seems like it's maybe a combination of things, both a rise in actual anti-Semitism, but also a growing awareness in both cases. I wonder, we look at it from a full world standpoint, what people are experiencing all over the world. But I'm curious about your own personal life. Like what has discrimination looked like in your life as a Jew?
Well, I served in the military for 20 years, and then I've been a chaplain with law enforcement. I'm a university professor. And fortunately for me, it hasn't been direct and hateful kind of stuff. But what I see is, I describe it as a tidal wave of ignorance, that people simply don't know about Jewish people, how we pray, what we believe. And so in my thinking, there's a very thin line between ignorance and prejudice, and it doesn't take a lot to cross over that thin line. I will add that I had an opportunity about 14 years ago now to visit the concentration camp of Auschwitz. And I'd read about it, I'd seen videos about it, but until you're there and you actually witness it, and it's an enormous place. I mean, you have to take a bus to get around, that's how big it is. And even though I was there, part of my brain still says it's hard to believe. I mean, you're actually building, in a very business-like way, this whole camp for the purpose of killing people, not making them slave labor and work 14 hours, 18 hours a day and sleep on the ground and give them food and water to help the war effort from the German perspective. And so we ask ourselves, how did it get that bad?
Yeah.
And where were the good people in Europe who had Jewish friends and Jewish doctors and Jewish teachers or knew Jews, and how do you flip so quickly? And so this is unfortunately part of this, we said 2,000-year history, that sometimes it's just breathtaking how those beliefs can turn into such pure evil and pure hatred.
Yeah. Well, how would you say your family and friends feel right now, Jewish family and friends, in going out into like traveling and eating in restaurants and just being out? What's the general feelings there right now?
My response is that people are cautious and afraid, unfortunately. So I've been told, we did some traveling over the summer, and I have a bracelet on my hand, which is my Hebrew name of Avraham, my wife gave to me.
Yeah.
And people literally said, take it off.
Wow.
And also your yarmulke, your skull cap, take it off. I said, why? They said, because you might be physically attacked. And so in some cases, I think there are people who are genuinely afraid. They're just scared, which is horribly sad. This is America. We all should be able to enjoy our own homes and our reality. But again, as you know, the part about prejudice is that it's quite tenacious, and it is an evil force, and this makes people act. So I would say that partly caution and partly afraid. Just to give you an example, we're all trained now when we go to services to look for the law enforcement person. So at every service, there's at least one police officer, sometimes two, depending on the services. I don't know if the local churches have that. So when I visit local churches sometimes, I just walk right in and I say, oh my gosh, that's how I remember 40, 50 years ago. You'd just walk in, it's a church, walk in, or a synagogue. But we have to live with that awareness. Recently, the synagogue where I worship put in some planters in the front, big, gigantic planters. And when you look at them, you say, oh, that's for the plants. But then when you see where they're placed, they're for security.
Wow.
And so it looks like planters to make it not so bad, but they were placed in a way so that you wouldn't be able to drive a car up and smash your way in. Oh. So it's too bad that when we go to services, one of the first things we check out is house security. And it's not just ours, it's almost universally in the area, probably around the world.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of sad. And we need, I think, as Americans to ask ourselves, is that what we want?
Yeah. I think I may have told you I met a Jewish man several months ago who was describing what you're describing now, the security measures at his local synagogue. And many in the synagogue have clearly been to Israel many times, and they said, it feels like we're in Israel, the way that the security has to be, taken and viewed and carefully planned out at this point. So let me just talk a little bit about what's happening in Israel right now. I know you have family and friends who are there. What's life like for them right now?
I think it's also going back to a lot of uncertainty. Remember, people don't realize that Israel's a really teeny country, north to south about 200, 225 miles, east to west, 40, 50, 60 miles. I mean, just think of it. At one point, from where I live and getting down to the Atlanta airport, that's a half-hour, 40-minute drive. That was the width of Israel. I mean, that's it. So it's not a big country. So there's, I would say, just a great deal of fear and uncertainty. Now, remember, people in the south were attacked, so they've been cleared out. People in the north are worried about an attack from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. So there's a lot of displacement, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of people who are blaming the government. It's a difficult time. What most Americans don't understand is when you visit Israel, you can literally stand, let's say in the north, in the Galilee, and with your own eyes, look in one direction and see Lebanon. Turn your body a little bit, look into Syria, turn your body further, you're looking at Jordan, just with your own eyes. So it's not like binoculars or something like that. So all these countries are kind of on top of each other. So unlike America, if somebody said to me, oh, in the state of New Mexico, because the Rio Grande, whatever, changed its course, we've lost 10 miles. I would say, okay, but I'll never be there. A gigantic country, it doesn't matter. But 10 miles for Israel is a good percentage of the country. So in many ways, it's sort of like you're living in a restricted area. So I think they are concerned a great deal and frightened too.
Yeah, no. Our prayers are with your family and friends, and we hope resolution and peace can come there. Thinking back in the U.S. right now, in America, why is anti-Semitism growing here right now? In Israel, it's complicated for many reasons.
Right.
But why are we seeing it so much here? And where's it originating?
That's a very good question, because in a way, it's illogical. If you disagree with the policies of any government, say so. And if you want to protest, protest. I mean, even in Israel, there are protests against the government. So all that is fine. So in a way, there's no logical connection between protesting against any governmental policy and then in the next breath saying destroy the whole country or whatever you want to say against Jewish people, because those two items aren't connected. But somehow people who are prejudiced, I think unfortunately we have people who are predisposed to be prejudiced who maybe 5 years ago would have kept that to themselves. There was no forum for them to articulate their anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
But now they're using the protest about what's going on in Gaza, which is a separate issue. They're using that as sort of an open door to go in. And unfortunately, I think it's tainting both sides, because it's tainting the protest by being anti-Semitic. Well, it's not tainting it the other way, but I think in some cases the legitimate protests have been overrun by the prejudicial people. So now you have this mishmash, and there should be no statement about Jews and Judaism if you're protesting something going on 7,000 miles away, but there is. So I just think, unfortunately, that people are getting confused about it, or they're using it as an opportunity to verbalize the anti-Semitism and feel that they're covered in a way because it's a protest about Gaza, etc.
Yeah, I feel like I personally have a lot to learn and want to keep learning. And as you mentioned at the beginning, this learning, that's where we can all come together and see that maybe our differences aren't as great as we thought they were, and that we do have even more in common. As we pursue that learning, at the same time, we want to do something and be supportive and help. And so what are some ways that we can support our Jewish friends? I'm a Christian. Many watching right now have really no religious affiliation, and yet they see the injustice and they want to do something about it. So what does support look like?
Well, support, it kind of depends on your personal situation. So if you have, if where you work, there's a Jewish person there, you might want to say to them, hey, how are things going? I mean, a lot of times, like I have a grandson over there now, and I have second cousins over there. You might meet somebody who has somebody in Israel. Certainly on a political level, to write congressmen and senators and all that and say, yeah, we support Israel, we support our Jewish friends. It would be interesting also for ministers to call up the local rabbis and say, hey, we support you, how can we, is there anything we can do? So I think in many ways it's sort of individualized, but it's interesting that so far, I think for part of the Jewish community, there's a little bit of disappointment that on the liberal side, there has been support for liberal causes. So you have many liberal synagogues that have supported the civil rights movement and the LGBTQ community, and anticipating support back the other way, and that support hasn't necessarily come. So I think in many ways just articulating support, either as an individual, on a political level, on a church level, would be most significant, because I had somebody ask me recently, on our doorpost we have what's called a mezuzah, which is a little teeny scroll that has some verses from the Bible on it, and this is something that Jesus would have had too, and it's on the doorpost of your house from Leviticus 6, place it on the doorpost of your house and upon your gates, and the custom is you kiss it on your way in and out of respect. And some people have asked me recently, should they take them off their doorpost because they don't want anyone from the outside to identify their home as a Jewish home, which is really scary. I mean,
so sad.
I had a lecture last night at Kennesaw, and the person was referring back to Nazism. And there were a number of laws passed in the evil Nazi period which separated Jewish people out. And in some ways, I think people are afraid that will something like that occur again. Or when you get that afraid to walk out in public, then I think it is a danger of our society. So to answer your question, any sort of affirmation on however you want to do that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I know many will want to do that, and So that's a big encouragement for everyone who's watching right now to verbalize that. I know this has been a passion of yours for a while to create awareness about the issue and to work towards a solution. You actually have several things that you're working on to do that. One especially creative way that you're doing that. So I thought I would show everyone this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this this Christmas tree ornament?
Right. Well, I have a nonprofit organization called the Jewish Christian Discovery Center, and the goal of that is to show Christians their Jewish roots, which on one hand, it's kind of funny to say that because you would think that from the outside, the Bible is just filled with so many Jewish references that you can't have the Christian scriptures without the Hebrew scriptures. I mean, it's literally impossible if we eliminate all the references to the prophets and on and on and on. So you would think from the outside that Christians would know their Jewish roots, but they don't. So I've written a few books, and my experience as a military chaplain and as a police chaplain and even as a university professor, I quickly realized how much ignorance there was and people simply not knowing. So the nonprofit was created to do that. And we have a number of projects that we've done, children's books. I made a video.
Yes, it was a great video. I need to put a link to that in this video.
It's cute. I showed it at the college last night. It's called The Magical Encounter. And two kids travel through time, which is totally believable that any child will say, sure, we can travel through time.
That's great.
I mean, Jesus as a 12-year-old. But my point here, one of the things we've done is we've, over the past 6 years, I've gone to local churches, and I used to give out a Star of David. Now, one of the parents said she had too many stars, so I shifted to menorahs. And you get this, you get a little postcard, and the postcard says, why are you being given this to put on your tree or anywhere around your house? Because Jesus indeed was Jewish. He observed all these holidays. And this, by the way, is actually, the menorah is more accurate historically than the Star of David. The Star of David comes later to identify Jewish people, but this menorah was synonymous with representing Judaism. So what we want people to do, so I've done it for 6 years in the Atlanta area and decided to go national this year because Hanukkah and Christmas are on the 25th of December, which doesn't occur that often, so we want to take advantage of that. And we simply want people to, by putting the menorah on your tree or anywhere in your house, you're acknowledging this relationship that Jesus was Jewish. And he wasn't just Jewish in name. He was a practicing Jew. So he observed all the holidays. He prayed in Hebrew every day. And so indeed for Hanukkah, he would have observed that. And as we spoke, it would have been very meaningful for him. And so that's what we want people to do. And we hope to have a public service announcement. We hope to have billboards. And I also hope that this becomes an annual event so that anybody, wherever they are, in their box of Christmas supplies, will just have a menorah. And if somebody says, why do you have that? Then they should be able to articulate, well, the person that we believe in and pray to was a Jewish individual, and this is what he did during this time.
Yeah, well, I think it's such a brilliant idea because, I have 4 kids of my own, and whenever we put up the Christmas tree each year, we have many ornaments from the past, some that were given to my kids by special people like grandparents and other family. And whenever we hang those ornaments on the tree, it's a reminder of that special relationship that they have. And so I think that is what's so beautiful about this. And what I'm looking forward to doing with my own kids this Christmas is being able to remind them of that relationship. And sometimes, sadly, it does take generational change to really bring about true change. And so I hope that this will be another start for many people to.
Yeah, I hope so, and that's part of as I'm a historian, in addition to a rabbi. But the hard part about this is, you look at something like anti-Semitism and say, And I said before, we've been at it 2,000 years. And that's really a head shaker, because I think it's fair to ask, will it ever end? Will it ever stop? And what we're doing, I mean, the simple fact that you're holding the menorah and you're going to put it on your tree, that's how we stop it. I mean, that's how you stop hatred. You take positive steps to push back against it. And so I think what people don't understand, that prejudice is quite powerful. It's quite tenacious. It's not like it's dormant and then you need a lot of factors. I think it's always going to be there. So we do have to examine our Bible, and we do have to examine some of the stories and interpretations of those stories. And the bottom line, I think, and this relates back to what we believe as Jews or as Christians, what does it mean to be a believer? What does that mean? And it should mean, in my opinion, that we treat people the same. I mean, it's ironic that Jesus is asked two of the greatest commandments, and he says, love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, constantly, that's a theme in Matthew. And so I always urge people, Jews and Christians, to say, where do you anchor yourself? What is one of your core beliefs? And I would think that that would be a core belief of any believer. I mean, what is God after all? God should be the force that teaches us how we should relate to the other and bring forth expressions of love and respect and dignity. And yet we're not doing that. I shouldn't have to be talking about anti-Semitism from 2,000 years ago. And I might add, by the way, sometimes you have to go all the way back, almost like to point zero. Say, okay, there was this person whose name was Jesus. And who was he? And oh, by the way, he did have a circumcision, which is a separate issue, but we call that a bris. But what did they do at the bris? His parents started a contract for him that he was going to be a member of the Jewish community. So we need to process all that. And then what do we conclude? That this person was Jewish. And so the relationship that I think between Judaism and Christianity should be between mother and child. The Judaism is mother, the child lives an independent life, but still has great affinity and respect for the parent. And if we just had that, then moving forward, things would be so wonderfully different.
Yeah. Well, I love your passion about this, and I also love your humility about it as well. I think it's amazing to have encountered what you've encountered personally, your family, your people,
Right.
and not have become bitter and resentful and still working towards the good. And so I think this is going to be a really powerful moment for parents and their children, and hopefully for our whole world, and to get the message out, to love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
And so again, I just thank you so much for this. For those who are interested in this, we will put a link in the description for how they can get one of these. And anyway, I just want to thank you so much. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for these conversations. I hope it won't be the last time like this.
No, I'll come back.
In fact, we'll have another special interview on another channel specifically to talk about Jesus.
Okay.
And I'm really looking forward to that conversation as well. And we'll put a link to that one. But thank you so much. We stand with you, love you, and I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Thank you, Houston.
My pleasure.
So of course, it's called Bagel Issues because it's bagel in New York style.